And we are live. A great, big, huge, jolly welcome to Liz Bicknell, one of my favorite people in kidlit in the whole world. Hi, Liz.
Hi, Mel. That was very kind of you.
I just got started. Before I forget, you have the honor of being the 200th interviewee on this video podcast. Which reminds me to introduce the podcast. So, hi, everybody. I'm Mel Rosenberg, the host of the Children's Literature channel of the New Books Network. And I am here with a true hero, and we'll talk about why that is, how that came to be, with Liz Bicknell, the wonderful, the one and only, who was the chief honcho of Candlewick for so many years, discovering some of the best talents in the universe. Liz, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mel. And it's great to be number 200. I just hope that I have one thing to say that none of the 199 others before me have said. Seems doubtful, but
I,
I'll
I,
try.
I, I I think you just did. So before we start, I want to shout out thanks to Amy Huskin, who found you, who discovered you. I've been trying to reach you since you left Candlewick. It's been difficult. You've been a little clandestine, but you're back in action. Do you want to say a few words about this wonderful mentoring you're doing with Whale Rock workshops?
Yeah, sure. So, when my retirement from Candlewick got announced in PW in 2023, I had an email from Gary Schmidt, the very well-known writer of mostly middle grade fiction. And he asked me if I would be interested in joining Whale Rock writing workshops as a mentor. And so I said, yes, actually, that sounds really interesting because obviously working with writers is pretty much my favorite part of being an editor. Um, so I signed on and I think I've done 3 seasons now. So there are a variety of different mentorships. There are sort of one-on-one arrangements, which is mostly what I've done, but there are also retreats in such lovely places as Maryland and one in Canada that I would have liked to have gone to last year. And then also this season, I'm working on a new workshop for them with Eugene Yelchin that we're hoping to launch next year. That's going to be about graphic novels. So lots of different offerings that they have. Very good people. It's great to be associated with them.
Well, Liz, you are the best. And we'll talk about it in a minute why I think that you're the best. But first, it's always interesting to me to try and figure out how people get involved in children's literature. So, without going into any details that you don't want to share, a few words about your childhood. When was it that you fell in love with children's literature? Or was it something that happened when you were an adult?
Hmm, that is a really good question. I was always a reader. I learned to read when I was 3, and my parents didn't really believe it until I proved that I could read the cricket scores in the newspaper. Oh, here's my co-interviewee,
That's
Poofy
fine.
the cat. Um, so then we went to the public library every week, and I think kids were allowed to take out 6 books, and I had 2 sisters. So we took out a lot of books, and we tried to read them all each by the time we got back to the library the next week. But I wouldn't say that I thought of myself as any kind of fan of children's literature back then. It was just the main activity that wasn't school or, climbing trees, or occasionally electricity pylons, or messing about outdoors, which is
You
also a lot of what I
you
did.
you were a tree climber,
I was a tree climber. My dad
except
had
for
three girls, and I was the oldest, still am the oldest as it happens. And so, I got the full effect of there not being a boy. So I learned fishing and tree climbing. But
there's a
yeah,
story.
reading, I loved reading, and I was a really, eclectic reader. So, for example, we weren't allowed to read at the table during meals. So I memorized the vitamin content of the cereals that we had instead. And I loved, every kind of book. I loved books, the Ladybird books, which we had a lot of, and Enid Blyton, very famous British writer, not exactly revered by people in the kidlit profession, but really engaging, pacey stories with lots of adventure. I do remember noticing as a child in Enid Blyton's books that the characters always gulped lemonade and munched chocolate. So you might say that was the first time I applied any kind of critical editorial eye to my reading. It's like, surely they do something else, you know? They don't always munch and gulp.
They're not always onomatopoeic.
Right.
Um, oh, so if you were reading yourself picture books at the age of 5, or probably reading to your siblings, what books do you remember from the picture books,
Mm.
if any?
Well, the series that I most remember were about a girl and a stuffed toy. And the first book was called Sarah and Hoppity, and there were two sequels. And Hoppity was a toy that had been brought to Sarah's parents' and toy repair hospital. But Hoppity was too far gone and could not be repaired. And so Sarah took him on. And in the stories, Hoppity always tells Sarah to do a naughty thing. So I hadn't thought about these books for years, and I went back to see if I could still find them, and I did manage to find all three of them on, secondhand book sites. But I also found out that in the 1960s they were very controversial. And they had been given to me by my grandmother, who was a librarian. So I kind of felt proud, 50 odd years later, finding out that my grandma had been a bit of a radical back in the day.
Controversial because
Because the child was not taking responsibility for her actions, she was blaming everything onto Hoppity. Mm.
who was to blame? So Hoppity is a rabbit.
I'm not even sure that he is a rabbit. He ought to be, right, with that name. He's a bit
Yeah.
amorphous. And the illustrations are quite abstract in a way. Like if you think Chris Rashka back in the 1960s, they have that kind of flavor. So
Mhm.
it's not
So
it's not super realistic, which works because, the toy is magical and can convince Sarah to be wicked.
there's a whole history of bunnies of all sorts in children's literature. Um,
Yes.
in all places, probably except France, where they eat them. So probably less books on bunnies there. And probably this influenced your later work as an editor because you're most famous for another bunny story, but we'll get there in a few minutes. So in your education, what did you study? Was there anything that led you into editing, and why aren't you an author?
I've never, ever, ever wanted to be an author. So I actually studied languages in at college. I studied Italian and Romanian. Romanian turned out to be slightly less useful in daily life, but I did manage some occasions of using it hitchhiking in Spain with a Romanian meat truck driver, for example. So that was useful. So when I left college, I thought that I might like to be a journalist. That was interesting to me. And my first publishing job was actually with a kind of political yearbook. So a book that had a section on every country or state in the world and was published, updated and published every year. So my countries were Italy, Andorra, Grenada, for some unknown reason, and the Vatican, which I don't think I realized at the time before that was, is a separate political entity, has its own railroad, even. So, yeah, so I thought I'd like to be a journalist. I got into publishing and I really loved the people who worked in publishing. Like I felt I had found my people. And so that's really the thing that first hooked me was my colleagues.
Okay, so Liz, I'm going to jump in now because I feel the same way. In my career, as you might know, I've done all kinds of weird things. But my favorite is writing for children because the people are so nice.
Yes.
This was something you noticed even in general literature. And even people who write for adults are nice. I didn't know that.
Well, they're not maybe quite as nice. For example, in my first big publishing job at Harcourt Brace, I ended up having to talk to Mary McCarthy, and she was absolutely terrifying. And I had to convince her of something that we were changing in her contract, and she did not want to be convinced of it. And I was very junior and very intimidated. But then I also got to know Eudora Welty at the same period, and she was an absolutely lovely human being. So, but in
In
general, yes,
in the
people
realm
in
of
the
the sorry,
children's book world are just the nicest.
in the realm of the mean people, you remind me of Jack Nicholson's role as Melvin in As Good as It Gets, where he's the meanest author, something awful. I always wondered whether it's actually tailored after some authors, but in Kidlit, people are so nice. And at Harcourt Brace, you were in already children's literature, or you migrated there?
I migrated. I started in what we call adult books, and the job of managing editor for the children's books department, which was growing at that point, became open, and I applied and got it, and that really was eye-opening for me because I discovered, a whole range of books I didn't know. That's how I learned of Margaret McElderry, sorry, because that's where she was originally, and back in the 50s and 60s.
So it was a while ago, perhaps even at the dawn of the internet.
It
and
was the
people
dawn of the internet, yes.
and there were few agents around. That's so I'm told. And people would send you self-addressed, excuse me, uh, letters with a self-addressed envelope with a stamp on it,
Yeah, right.
and there was a real slush pile.
There was a real slush pile, yes, a physical pile.
A few words about that.
Well, sometimes we got manuscripts that contained um, things like cookies or stickers, which were always a little hard to deal with. It's like, what if they don't like us and these are poisoned cookies? What if we stick these stickers on something and,
You should have
they
you should have written, "We don't accept cookies."
we don't accept cookies, right? Only pre-wrapped chocolate bars, please.
Mhm. I
Yes.
wonder whether somebody wrote you a manuscript about a mouse who loves cookies and you turned it down because the cookies weren't yummy.
So I didn't have the opportunity to turn that one down, Mel.
But you did, and then from there to Candlewick.
Yes, exactly. So that was 1996. I was hired by Candlewick. Um, and I
Were you
was
head
hired.
were you headhunted?
No, actually, an author I worked with, Kathy Lasky, told me that Candlewick was looking for an editor-in-chief, and she said, I think you'd be perfect. So, kind of almost on a whim, I applied. And it was one of those things where they, so David Lloyd, who's a famous children's book editor and the former chairman of Walker Books in England, hired me, and he had two things to say to me. One was, we don't think you have enough experience, so the first 2 years are going to be a bit rough. And the second thing he said was, do no harm to the Walker list. So I
Oh,
wrote those two.
I have to ask you. I just realized. I mean, I know that Candlewick is Walker in the States, but why isn't it Walker? Why does it have another name? I never.
Oh, well, when Candlewick was founded, 91, I think, the name Walker was already taken in the States by
Wow.
Walker Publishing, I think, that was part of Bloomsbury.
Oh,
So so it couldn't be Walker at that time.
could have been
That
wrong, but can't.
imprint later folded, and then Karen Lotz bought the Walker name for the US. So
So
anyway,
Candlewick folded back into Walker, but by that time, Candlewick had such a wonderful reputation that
right, we didn't
and
necessarily need the Walker name
and
at that point. Yeah.
and I'm going to say that it gained that reputation largely to your credit. What was now? I'm coming now to the gritty nitty.
The
Liz,
gritty.
what was your magic? What is
Um,
your magic? But what was it, Candlewick?
well, I think that all editors have to learn to work within the existing structure, profile, um, and what's the word? Well, the expertise of where they are working. So, coming from Harcourt Brace, where we had seen Candlewick come on the scene, and it was so different. It had a color catalog the authors were listed alphabetically. There was this sort of feeling of difference that was exciting. And so seeing that and combined with following David Lloyd's advice of doing no harm, I wanted to just really sort of build on what they were doing without internally competing with it. So I think if maybe I had any magic at the beginning, it was not knowing what I didn't know and therefore feeling that the scope of children's literature could be expanded. Like I, I always I was always trying to see how far I could go with something, you know. Not necessarily just picture books, but I'm thinking of works like M.T. Anderson's Octavian Nothing novel, for example. I mean, that's just an extraordinary book for any area of publishing, but it was perhaps particularly extraordinary in children's publishing. Um, so, and
Did,
I
did you get
always
did, did
believed,
did you get into trouble for going out on a limb? Because if I'm using a metaphor, going back to the young Liz, um, you're a person from the age of almost zero likes to climb trees and go out on limbs, and and um, and so even before the this hungry bear, which we're going to get to in a moment, that I think changed a lot. Did you have other than the book you mentioned? Do you have a reputation as Liz Bicknell is a person who explores things that other editors don't, who's not
I
afraid to
think
take chances?
I did get that reputation and yes, it was deserved. So, when you go to conferences and things, people always ask you, what are you looking for? Well, I was never looking for anything except perhaps to be surprised. That was really what I was looking for. So I would say that I'm looking to be surprised. And then that moved on to my saying, how about you show me the book in your bag that you really love, but that you think no one will publish? Because I
Wow.
probably would be interested in that book.
See, that's already something nobody has said on the program.
Oh, good.
Um, and that's remarkable because at some stage the agents took over, and agents now I have agents and they're wonderful, but most of the agents that I've interviewed and read about, they do play towards trends.
Mm,
They don't necessarily take Michigan authors um, because they want to sell the books. And then they become a buffer for you, Liz. Or am I wrong?
I don't think that agents can be held responsible, really. You know, I think you have to look at this where books are sold in the States and the consolidation of, well, from my era, the independent bookstores were a much bigger force. And then they were displaced by Borders and Barnes and Noble. And then Borders was gone. And then, Barnes and Noble now trying to kind of come back. But both of those really displaced by Amazon. And, I expect you probably read this week that Baker and Taylor has folded or is folding, which is, so there's this huge consolidation of where books are sold. And when books are sold by people other than independent booksellers, then they're making their decisions a lot of the time based on sort of matrices and algorithms. So you're inevitably going to lose that kind of quirky one-off book. Yes, the kind of book that I have always been interested in. And I still champion, maybe
Well,
foolishly.
no, I think you're wonderful. And when I talk about this whole thing of trying to write a picture book for a trend, books on this are big, books on that. So this pitch of a bear who gets so pissed off by this rabbit who took his hat that he eats
Mm.
him, and there was one person in the world who wanted this book, but I can't get past this. How did this happen? Tell us something about this process that
All
nobody
right.
knows. That nobody knows.
First just to say you're talking about Jon Klassen and his books about willful animals, um, which started with I Want My Hat Back. Um,
Which
so
sold
the
which sold
submission,
over which sold over 1 million copies, and which you bought and
yes.
edited.
So I will say it came in from Stephen Malk at Writer's House. Stephen Malk is an agent who I really respect. And I always, always open a submission from him immediately. So I opened this one and I read it. And of course, at the end, I burst out laughing. And so I sent the proposal to another person in my team who we lost this year in July, Katie Cunningham, a fantastic editor who worked with me for more than 20 years. It was her first job out of college, and so that's the a very big loss for me and for children's books. But anyway,
Sorry.
I sent the proposal to Katie, and I didn't expect her necessarily to read it immediately, but she evidently did because within about 5 minutes I heard a huge belly laugh coming from her cubicle. And I thought, okay, that's two of us. And so I made an offer for it the regular kind of a way. It was an auction, and it wasn't until after the auction was over and we obviously won that Jon Klassen told me that a lot of the other editors bidding had wanted to change the ending. And it never even occurred to me that would be an idea of any merit.
What, to change the ending?
Right. I mean, it's like the ending
The
is the whole
the
thing.
ending makes it. I'm going to quote the New
Yes.
York Times. A charmingly wicked little book. That, for me, that says it all.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Charmingly wicked.
does. Charmingly wicked.
Liz, I have to ask you a question about this book. Um, am I like as an author? I read picture books assiduously, the words, and I glance at the pictures. I know I should be more attentive, but I get to the end and I see him running backwards. We're giving this away because everybody's read this book. um, and then I said to myself, "Oh my goodness, how did I miss that? Is it just me, or does everybody miss it?"
Well, the answer is actually in the text. The answer is not really in the pictures. Because if you return to the conversation that the bear has with the fox, you discover that when the fox is lying, he talks too much.
Oh.
And so you can infer from that conversation that at the end, when the bear is talking too much, that he too is lying.
No, okay, but I mean, what I'm referring to is I missed the hat on the rabbit.
Oh, you did.
It's just me out of
Well,
like a
Mel, no child misses the hat on the rabbit.
just just us
Children are
adults.
looking at the pictures.
So I feel really stupid now. So there were some adults who missed it, or just me?
Well, we don't have surveys about
I
these things.
well, I must tell you that I had a good laugh at myself for missing that, and
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed, but here it is in front of everybody. Thousands of people are going to know that I missed the hat. But I love the book, and it's an incredible story. It's like, Liz, is it because to sell over 1 million copies, and then to have excellent and sequels that are like rivals to the first book, and then your somebody's idea of putting them together in a hat box.
Mm.
Whose idea was that? The hat box. I love that idea.
Well, it was either the idea of Anne Stott, our brilliant art director, or it was the idea of Jon Klassen, or it was an idea that was just born of the fact that in-house we always referred to it as the hat box because, you have shorthand for anything in-house. And then suddenly that was its name. I don't
When
recall.
when was it obvious at what juncture that this book was going to be a mega hit? I mean,
I
before
I
before
think,
it started
yeah,
becoming a bestseller.
it was really when people started making memes of it. I remember seeing a Lego one and then a knitted one, and thinking, wow, it was it is a great book. It's a great book, but there's always luck in these things and a certain, confluence of timing and gestalt.
I couldn't agree more. And this brings us to our encounter in 2016. I met you the first time I flew from Israel to New York to the SCBWI meeting. A real eye opener for me because I thought I could write, and at that meeting I realized that there were 1,000 other authors there, and they were all better than me. And you were giving a plenary talk, and I started speaking to you during the intermission, and you were nice, and we had a conversation just between you and me. I can remind you later what it was about, but we stayed in touch over the years, and this little nothing of a Melvin would send you manuscripts, and about once every year or two, and you would actually respond. And what was that all about? I mean, you got to be the nicest person in the world, and they give me advice and tips. Wow.
Well, responding to authors was always really important to me. I just felt it was so rude, to let 9 months or a year go by and just, and then just say one line, sorry, not for me. Although I'm sure I did that sometimes because the amount of submissions that any editor gets can become overwhelming, really.
I was enthralled that you answered me. And
Well,
I must,
I know you're not looking for a compliment, clearly,
no.
but I will say, first of all, there was definitely something, in your work that I recognized had quality. So I wanted to encourage you. But I also could see that you were a very respectful person who wasn't going to inundate me with 10 more manuscripts because I'd said one nice thing about one. So those two factors made it feel like a safe opportunity for an overwhelmed editor to
It
continue
and
corresponding.
it wasn't like Mel fix the ending and send it to me again. I'd like to take another look at it.
No, I didn't think you were there yet. It
Okay, so
wasn't.
and you see,
But you are now, and you're published, and that's
but yeah, well,
wonderful.
so here's the thing. Um, and I can't believe that we had this once a year relationship. The book that I wrote that's coming out, that it came out in Israel and won prizes, and PJ in Israel just bought 50,000 copies, which is incredible for me. And it's launching in February with Random House Studio, and I have to pinch myself every hour on the hour. I looked back, Liz, in preparation for this discussion, and I actually sent that to you.
Oh, you did.
Um,
Well, I'm
I did.
famous for turning things down, you know.
No, no, but here's the thing: it wasn't ready. It
Mm.
wasn't ready, and you gave me some advice that was really good advice, but I didn't know how to take it. And eventually, I fixed the manuscript, and it was successful here in Israel, and yada yada. But it was clear when I look back, I wasn't ready. The manuscript wasn't ready. And I wasn't ready to understand what you were getting at when you gave
Mhm.
me these pointers. So it is all about timing and finding a manuscript, I think, that you think can be readied. Because even if you had said to me, Mel, send me a revision of this, I wouldn't have done a good revision. I wasn't there yet, as you said.
You know, editors can have that same experience of, so for example, um, Chris Rashka, whom I worked with a fair amount, um, had sent in a little handmade dummy of a book he wanted to do about Sun Ra, the jazz musician. And I read it when it came in, and I thought, oh, this is impossible. And I put it on my shelf because I couldn't, it was a beautiful little handmade dummy, and I didn't want to send it back. I wanted to keep it there. And finally, about a year later, Brenda Bowen, Chris's agent, wrote to me and said, if you're not going to do anything with that dummy, you should send it back. So I thought, all right, well, I'll just have one last look at it before I send it back. And I read it again and I thought, of course this is a book. What was I thinking? So obviously the dummy hadn't changed in a year, but evidently I had in some way.
So authors or agents have to submit their best possible stuff. In your case, a little quirky if possible. And then everything else is time.
It
Is
is timing, yeah.
and this is like is a manuscript, and I continue to write. Is something ready to send? If I work on it another year, maybe I'll be too late. Maybe somebody else will come out with a book about something. And this is one of the things that we only know in retrospect when the bear gets to eat the rabbit.
Right, because, you know, from the editor's side of the desk, the reasons that you pass on, or I should just say my reasons for passing on something are generally, I feel overwhelmed with my existing workload. I can't imagine taking on another book and a new author, let's say, and giving that person what they deserve. I'm just too stretched. That's one reason. Another reason could be there is a lot of that particular topic already out in the marketplace, Or we have at Candlewick, let's say, a lot of that particular topic in the pipeline, books about grandparents dying, let's just say, for an example, because I remember that being true.
Not necessarily being eaten by bears.
No, that might be more interesting. Well, I guess
I'm
historically
taking a
they're
note.
eaten by wolves, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, you as the author or the agent are sending the text in and meeting that wall of reasons why an editor can't right now, you
And
know.
never knowing.
Not
Um,
no, probably not.
yeah. So Liz, unbelievably, our time is over, and I want to continue in half a year or a year, and we'll have more stuff to talk about. But we've run on for over 40 minutes,
Oh
so
my
it's time.
goodness.
Yes, it's time to say goodbye to everybody. And I have been with the incredible Liz Bicknell talking about my favorite subject, which is children's literature, with my favorite person in this genre. You were so kind. And the fact that I am now a published author is largely due to you and a few other people who gave me the feeling that I might be worth something someday. Anyway, I'm Mel Rosenberg. I'm the host of the Children's Literature Channel for the New Books Network, and I've been here with the incredible Liz Bicknell. Liz, we're going to say goodbye to everybody, and we're going to come out, and just you and I, we're going to close the
Okay.
class. Bye bye,
Thanks,
world.
Mel. This is
Thanks
wonderful.
so much.
Bye-bye.
Interview number 200.
Okay.